Like to call the meeting to order for the Joint Standing Committee on Energy interim meeting. To look to the clerk for take a silent roll call. We have a clerk. I guess we don't have a clerk, but we do have a quorum. So, yep, we have a quorum. So I look to the vice chair for motion for the approval of the minutes from July 26th and September 13th, 2022 meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the approval of the minutes for the previous two meetings.
Motion is approval of the minutes for the July and September meeting. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Ayes have it. Motion carries. All right, the first item of business is a presentation regarding proposed needs for Good Samaritan statute by representatives of the West Virginia Manufacturers Association. Rebecca, if you're coming to the podium.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the invitation to talk with this group this afternoon about an issue that I just learned about a few months ago from my members. As the chairman indicated, my name is Rebecca McPhail. I'm with the West Virginia Manufacturers Association, and we represent manufacturers of all types and sizes and geographic locations all over West Virginia, and a few right here in Berkeley Springs. Got Caperton, I'm talking about Caperton Furniture Works. And I think you can see some of his pieces actually around the resort. So do take a look at that. So I am trying to understand an issue that my members brought to me a couple of months ago, as I said, particularly our chemical manufacturers in the Kanawha Valley. And the most simple way I've come to understand it is this. You're in a restaurant, someone has medical distress, and you hear the thing we hear in movies is there a doctor in the house. So someone gets up, they're a doctor, they have expertise in handling that response that no one else has in the restaurant or whatever facility. And 6 months later, they find themselves in court for malpractice because they responded in good faith during an emergency that no one else could address. So I'm here to introduce a couple of experts who can tell you a little bit about how this works for the manufacturing industry and for first responders. Today, we have Tom Kiefer, who is the administrator of the Kanawha County Local Emergency Planning Commission, and Philip Fout, who is an employee of the Chemours Corporation at the Bell plant in Kanawha County. They, along with some of the members of a group that gathers to talk about these sorts of issues, brought this to our attention a couple of months ago, and we thought it was something that the legislature really should take a look at so that we can address community response to disasters outside of our fence lines as manufacturers. And Tom, I'll turn it over to you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. As Rebecca said, Tom Kiefer, currently the administrator for the Kanawha-Putnam Emergency Planning Council, representing the two counties of Kanawha and Putnam. Late 1921 era, we started revamping our all hazard plan, which is a requirement of the EPA and the state regulations. And as we've done that, we started looking at how to respond to chemical emergencies outside the facilities and even on the facilities, of how they would be handled, what would be the all-encompassing type of plan. Much to our surprise, we found that we were sort of struggling with what that answer looked like. Took me back prior to my days as the administrator. I spent 30 years at the Bell plant, which then became Chemours, working for DuPont, doing emergency response. So for folks who was around in the late 1990s, you recall we started doing the State Emergency Response Commission, forming regional teams, having groups who would respond out to responses. From late 1990s to 2015, our team at Bell would respond to anyone's call, whether it was the fire department, the Turnpike Commission, ambulance services, DEP. The response team with full-fledged response trained folks, equipment would respond to help the local fire department, the local volunteer firemen who show up willing to help, just need someone to give them guidance as to what to do. And along about 2015, I took retirement, and then things sort of started transitioning a little bit. So I'll let Philip come up and talk about where we're currently at today.
Thank you, Tom. Good afternoon, Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Philip Fowler. I'm the Site Services Manager at the Comores Plant in Bell, just east of Charleston. As a Site Service Manager, I manage the emergency response, safety, fire protection, utilities, security, and safety at the site. Today, I'm here to represent industry on behalf of the West Virginia Manufacturers Association regarding the Hazmat Good Samaritan statute. So at the Comores Plant, we take great pride in protecting our employees and the communities in which we operate. We have many safeguards in place to help us do that. We also have emergency response teams, personnel that are highly trained in hazardous materials response, confined space rescue, technical rescue, first aid, CPR. All those things take place inside the fence line, but are not permitted off-site due to fear of litigation. So anytime we have if we would have a release or a fire of any sort, then we're able to handle that inside the fence. But if the local Bell Fire Department down the street calls and says, hey, we've got this chemical spill, can you come and help us out? We're not allowed to go outside the fence line because of the fear of litigation. You know, we've got our folks take 80, 100, 200 hours of training each year to refresh on these skills that we're specializing in. And the local fire departments, no offense to those folks, but they don't have the specialized training that we receive and we practice on day in, day out. So if this kind of training, you know, why wouldn't we want to go outside the fence line to help our communities that we operate in, or even, you know, inside the state itself? So that's where this kind of comes from, is that if we didn't have the fear of litigation, we have all the highly trained individuals that would be willing to go out and respond, but without any kind of protection, we're just kind of limited to do that. Another piece to it that I'd like to add is I'm also all those comments were from the industry side, but I've been a 28-year member of the Golly Bridge Fire Department in Fayette County also. So I know the pieces of when I used to respond on Golly Mountain to a tractor trailer rollover, that my initial instinct was call the TERP team. I'd call Tom Kiefer and here he would come to help me. So now those teams aren't here to assist with that. So who do they call in case of emergency? You know, we have a good friend of mine's on Charleston Fire Department on their hazmat team, and Tom and I are both his first calls. You know, hey, what do I do with this? You know, we would love to be able to go and stand right at in his hip pocket and say, this is what you need to do, or this is what we can do to help. But the only thing we can do is just be on the other end of the phone line. So, thank you.
Our presentation was brief, but I think that was by design. We'd love to hear from you, to answer questions. But once again, we're looking at litigation issues being a barrier to community response in West Virginia. And I think in some instances, protecting our company brands and not being seen as responsible when we're really just trying to come and respond. Mr. Chairman, questions?
Okay, thank you. Delegate.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rebecca, thank you. Mr. Felt, sorry, you just stay there. You're responsible for the hazmat team at Comores and Charleston.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Back in the early to mid 80s, I was on the team that established the hazmat facilities at the Washington Works facility. So I know what went into that, and I know that those hazmat trucks that we had on our site were probably better equipped than anything that any volunteer or paid fire department had anytime within the state of West Virginia. It was there. Our people were better trained than any of the professional firefighters. And I know during the 80s and early 90s, we responded off-site. What changed? Was there a law that did away with Samaritan, or?
There was no one event that I'm aware of that actually took place. I think it was just a transition just in time for the most part. As Tom mentioned, 2015, 16-ish in that vicinity, that's when DuPont spun off and we became Comores at that site. And I don't know if it must have just been that time, because it seemed like the whole industry kind of veered down that path. Once we became Chemours, and I can't speak for the Altivias and the Dows and the other sites that are along in Chemical Valley, but that was kind of the Chemours side of it, was that, we would love to be able to go out to help, but just with the fear of litigation, we're not permitted to go outside the fence lines. But like you said, the trucks, they're still in place. They're loaded down with supplies, absorbent materials, personal protective equipment, air monitoring equipment. We have them at Bell. We have them at Washington Works in Wood County. And like you said, they're probably more stocked and supplied than any other department in the state, but they can't go outside the fence line.
I think Wood County, last couple of years developed a hazmat truck as well for the county, but I don't think it's near what the trucks at Chemours have. I don't think they're stocked nearly as well. I think it's totally unfortunate that we don't utilize in our communities, that we don't utilize the abilities that these people have and the special training that they have. And I think it's awful, but I do believe that our insurance companies throughout, not just West Virginia, but nationwide have gotten more and more scared over lawsuits and backlash from different things. If one of our people maybe went out and did something and it ended up that someone else got sick over it, they were getting sued. And, I think the Good Samaritan program is pretty necessary for the state of West Virginia. And, I would encourage the legislature next year, take something like that up and look forward to moving forward with it. It was a great program when we had it at DuPont. It could be a great program today. And it did and will continue to save lives. Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Young, who would
Thank
you like
you.
to ask the question to?
Please, yes, to Rebecca, I think so. My question is, what is the scope of legislation that you're talking about? Are we talking about the companies being able to go into the communities being able to go into the companies, or what does the bill look like to you right now?
Well, let me start by saying we don't have a draft bill. This was a concept that we just started talking about a couple of months ago. We've talked to a few legislators about that. I think what we want is to shield the companies who go outside the fence line, to encourage, obviously, the first responders to be able to call on them and use those resources. But, we don't want a situation where a chemical company or a manufacturing company responds to an accident on the turnpike and then is named in a lawsuit just because someone is coming in and anybody that has touched it is getting named in the lawsuit. I mean, sadly, we're seeing that with an incident recently, and we've seen it with incidents in the past, which I think speaks to Philip's kind of transition in time. Things started happening and, you might have made a chemical that was spilled and suddenly you're named in a lawsuit, even though you had nothing to do with how it was stored or how it was transported.
Yeah. So are you thinking more just for like emergency management or things like remediating property?
I think it's emergency management. I mean, this would be a response, not a remediation.
And specifically when hazardous waste is involved, or kind of anything?
I mean, it could be anything. It could, and Philip, you can give some examples of what your team does.
So I think this would be more for the actual emergency response itself. With the OSHA guidelines, there's two separate responders. There's an actual technician that will go in and mitigate the leak or stop the leak, plug a hole or stop something that way. And then there's a cleanup side, which you're speaking of, once hazardous waste is generated. This would be, so if, as Rebecca said, if there was a wreck on the turnpike, or if you have a rail line that goes through your county and there was a train derailment, then we would be there. We would be able to come off site and go and try to make it better, stop the leak, shut a valve, do something to help to prevent the problem from getting bigger, as opposed to like right now, if we had to wait 4, 5, 6 hours for a contract emergency response team to come from another state, to come in there. So that's where this would be the benefit, is we could reduce the footprint of the incident by a whole lot.
Cool. Thanks.
It would be for all shipments, not necessarily waste. The waste no longer. For all chemical shipments.
No, I get that. My only concern was like, what if there's a site that needs remediated and somebody wants to buy it and then they don't want to be held liable for cleaning it? You know what I mean? Because I know those types of Good Samaritan laws.
Yeah, I think that is an issue separate from what
Okay.
we're trying to address.
Okay, yeah, this seems great. Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, I've got one. Do you know of any incidents in the state where a class is protected under the Good Samaritan law? I'm
think there-
thinking maybe,
There's a rule for physicians. I can't cite the code where that is, but I think that's relatively recent legislation. I have that at my house on my computer at my office, but not here, but it does exist for medical attention.
medical.
Oh, and fire services,
Fire
Mr.
services.
Keeper indicates has similar protections.
All right, thank you. Thanks for bringing this to our attention. Assuming the next step was we'd have to draft a bill and we'd need your, association to help us get a bill drafted.
And we are ready to do that.
And encourage the members if they have any concerns or perks that they'd like to express on the legislation, Delegate Young brought out some points there. So, all right. No other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you for being here today, Rebecca. All right. This is the only thing we had on the agenda. We didn't know how long it was going to take, so we didn't put anything else on there. Misspoke because I counted some delegates that wasn't on the committee, so we did not have a quorum. So not mentioning names, but so we will try to approve the amendments in our December interim meeting. So the amendments was not approved. So that being said, look to my vice chair for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move we adjourn.
Motion is to adjourn. All those in favor, say aye. All those opposed, stay here.
It's about the first week of December.